Clara Mercer's knees hit the frozen boardwalk. Her wedding ring clattered against the giant rancher's boots. "Please?" Her voice broke. "My children haven't eaten in 3 days. I'll give you everything. Just help them survive the night." The scarred man stared down at her. Snow fell between them. The whole town watched. Nobody moved. If you want to know what happens next, subscribe to my channel and follow Clara's story until the very end. Comment the city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now let me take you back to where it all began.
Chapter Babur.
The wind cut through Clara Mercer's shawl like a blade through paper. She pulled Eli closer, her son's thin body shaking against her side. Grace clung to her skirt, silent, too weak to cry anymore. 3 days, 72 hours since their last real meal. The general store stood 20 paces ahead. Clara's legs trembled, not from cold, from what she was about to do. "Mama." Eli's voice cracked, 11 years old and trying so hard to sound like a man. "I can go. You don't have to." "Hush." She touched his cheek. His skin was ice. "Stay with your sister." Clara climbed the steps. Her reflection caught in the frost-covered window. Hollow cheeks, cracked lips, eyes that had forgotten how to hope. She barely recognized herself. She pushed through the door. Warmth hit her face. The smell of coffee, dried beans, salted meat. Her stomach cramped so hard she nearly doubled over. Magdalena O'Brien looked up from behind the counter. 61 years old. Silver hair, pin-tight eyes that had seen everything this territory could throw at a woman. "Clara?" Maggie's voice softened. "Lord have mercy, child. You look half dead." "I need—" Clara's throat closed. She placed her hand on the counter, opened her fingers. The wedding ring caught the lamplight. Gold worn thin from 8 years of marriage. The only thing Samuel had given her that she hadn't sold. Maggie went still. "How much?" Clara whispered. "Put that away." "How much will you give me?" "I said put it away." Maggie came around the counter, moving fast for a woman her age. She gripped Clara's wrist. "Samuel Mercer saved my granddaughter's life. You think I'm going to take his ring from his widow?" Tears burned Clara's eyes. She blinked them back. "My children are starving, Maggie. Grace hasn't spoken in 2 days. Eli tried to eat bark this morning." Her voice broke. "I don't have anything else." The door opened behind them. Cold air rushed in. Clara didn't turn. She couldn't look at whoever was watching her beg. But Maggie's face changed. Something flickered there. Fear, maybe? Or warning. "Mrs. Mercer." The voice was male, deep, cold as the wind outside. Clara's spine went rigid. She knew that voice. She turned. Marcus Whitfield stood in the doorway. 52 years old, silver-streaked haircoat, worth more than Clara's entire homestead. Behind him, 2 men hired muscle faces blank as stone. What a coincidence! Whitfield smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "I was just coming to discuss your account." Clara's fist closed around the ring. "I have nothing to discuss with you." 30 days. He stepped closer. His boots left wet marks on Maggie's clean floor. "That's how long you have to pay the remaining balance. $3,200. "That's not the right amount." Clara's voice shook, but she held his gaze. "Samuel borrowed $1,200. We paid back $800 before he died. The debt is $400, not $3,000. Whitfield's smile widened. "Interest, Mrs. Mercer. Compounding interest, plus fees for late payment, storage of medical supplies, administrative costs." He pulled a folded paper from his coat. "It's all documented, legal and binding." "It's fraud." The word hung in the air. Whitfield's smile vanished. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Careful." His voice was soft. "Dangerous. Accusations like that require proof. Do you have proof, Mrs. Mercer?" Clara's heart hammered. She thought of the children outside. Eli's hollow cheeks. Grace's silence. I have the original loan document. Samuel kept it in his medical case. Something flickered in Whitfield's eyes. Gone so fast, she almost missed it. Fear. Original documents can be misplaced. He tucked the paper back in his coat. Lost. Damaged by fire. The territory is dangerous in winter. He moved toward the door. 30 days, Mrs. Mercer. Pay the balance or vacate the property. Your choice. He paused at the threshold. Oh, and those children of yours, they look hungry. Terrible thing watching little ones suffer because their mother is too proud to accept a fair settlement. His gaze dropped to her closed fist. I'd consider selling that ring before it's too late. Some things are worth more than sentiment. The door closed behind him. Silence filled the store. Clara realized she was shaking. Not from cold, from rage. Maggie's hand touched her shoulder. Clara. He killed him. The words tore out of her. Samuel got the typhoid call from Whitfield's mining camp. Marcus begged him to come, said his workers were dying. Her throat burned. Samuel went. He always went. And while he was saving Whitfield's miners, he caught the fever himself. I know, child. And now he wants to take our home, our land, everything Samuel built. Maggie squeezed her shoulder. Come to the back. I'll fix you something to eat. The children, too. I can't. You can and you will. Maggie's voice hardened. You think Samuel would want you fainting in my store? You think that'd help those babies outside? She guided Clara toward the back room. Pride is a luxury, Clara. Right now, survival comes first. The back room smelled of bread and coffee. Clara's legs gave out. She sank into a chair, the ring still clutched in her palm. Maggie opened the door, called to Eli. Moments later, the children stumbled in. Grace's face was gray. Eli looked ready to collapse. Maggie set bowls in front of them. Stew thick with meat and potatoes. Bread still warm. Neither child moved. Eat. Maggie's voice gentled. It's all right. Your mama said you could. Eli looked at Clara. She nodded. They ate like animals, desperate, wordless. Clara watched her own stomach screaming, but she couldn't swallow past the knot in her throat. Grace made a sound. The first sound in 2 days. A small whimper of relief. Clara's tears finally fell. Maggie sat across from her, waiting until the children slowed. Until the animal desperation faded and they looked human again. Now. Maggie's voice was low. Tell me about this original document. Clara wiped her face. Samuel kept everything. Every contract, every receipt, every loan paper. He said, her voice cracked. He said you couldn't trust men like Whitfield with ink and paper. Smart man. The original loan was $1,200. I saw it. I was there when he signed. Clara leaned forward. Whitfield added numbers, changed the terms. I don't know how, but he did. Maggie's eyes narrowed. Where's the original now? Home. In Samuel's medical case under the floorboards. Clara hesitated. At least it should be. You haven't checked? I couldn't. The admission burned. After Samuel died, I couldn't. I couldn't open his things. His case still smells like him. His notes are in there. His handwriting. She pressed her palms against her eyes. Every time I try, I just... Maggie was quiet for a long moment. Listen to me. Her voice was firm but kind. Grief is a luxury too. Like pride. You got 2 children who need you alive and fighting. Samuel's dead. God rest him, but you're not. And if that document exists, it's the only thing standing between you and the street. Clara lowered her hands. I know. Then you go home tonight. You open that case. You find that paper. Maggie stood, moved to a cabinet, pulled out a wrapped bundle. More food. Preserved meat, dried apples, cornmeal. This will last you a week. Don't argue. Maggie. I said, don't argue. The older woman pressed the bundle into Clara's arms. And Clara, be careful. Whitfield knows you have something. That look in his eyes when you mentioned the original. She shook her head. That was fear. A man like Marcus Whitfield doesn't feel fear unless he's got something to lose. Clara tucked the ring back in her pocket. He's got everything to lose. If I can prove he forged that debt, then he goes to prison and you keep your land. Maggie's expression was grave. But first you got to survive long enough to prove it, and that man has broken better people than you. The walk home took 2 hours. The cabin appeared through the pines as the sun bled red across the horizon. Small, weathered, the windows dark, but whole, still standing. Clara stopped at the door. Her hand trembled on the latch. Mama? Eli's voice was quiet. Are you okay? No, she wasn't okay. She hadn't been okay in 4 months. Since the morning Samuel rode away and never came back. I'm fine. She pushed the door open. Get your sister inside. Start the fire. The cabin was cold but dry. Eli moved to the hearth with practiced efficiency. Grace sat on the bench wrapped in a quilt, still silent but more alert now that she'd eaten. Clara stood in the center of the room. The floorboard was 3 steps from the bed. She knew exactly which one. Samuel had loosened it himself, said every man needed a place for things that mattered. She'd avoided that spot for 4 months. Mama? Eli's voice came from the hearth. He'd paused with kindling in his hands. What are you looking for? Something your father left. Clara knelt. Her fingers found the loose board, pried it up. Something that might save us. The medical case was there. Leather worn smooth from years of use. The brass clasp Samuel had polished every Sunday. She lifted it out. The weight was familiar. The smell. Oh God, the smell. Carbolic acid and peppermint. Samuel's soap. His hands. Clara's eyes closed. For one moment, one terrible, beautiful moment, he was there, sitting beside her, telling her everything would be all right. Then the moment passed. She opened the case. Papers. Dozens of them. Receipts, notes, medical records. Samuel's handwriting everywhere, cramped and careful, always rushing to capture the next thought. She searched. Invoice from medical supplier. No. Letter from his mother in Boston. No. Notes on typhoid treatment. No. Her hands were shaking now. Pages slipping through her fingers. Where is it? She whispered. Eli appeared beside her. What are you looking for? A loan document. Your father's signature and Whitfield's. It should be here. She dumped the remaining contents on the floor, spread them out, searched again. Nothing. It wasn't there. Clara sat back on her heels. Cold crept through her chest. It's gone. Her voice was hollow. He took it. Whitfield took it. But how? Eli frowned. He couldn't have known where Pa hid things. He came. After the funeral. The memory surfaced bitter as bile. He said he was paying respects. Said he wanted to check on us. I let him in, Eli. I let that snake into our home. Her fists clenched. He must have come back. When we were sleeping. When we were in town. He broke in and took the only proof I had. So, what do we do? The question hung in the cold air. Clara looked at her son, 11 years old, already learning that the world was cruel, that powerful men took what they wanted, that justice was a lie told to children. She refused to let that be his lesson. We find another way. She gathered the papers, placed them back in the case. Your father kept copies of everything. He gave copies to witnesses, to the bank, to... She stopped. Maggie. Maggie had been there. Clara remembered now through the fog of 2 years ago. Maggie had witnessed the loan signing, had even made a comment about Whitfield's terms being harsh. If Samuel gave anyone a copy, it would be Maggie. Get some sleep. Clara stood. Both of you. Tomorrow, we fight back. Eli hesitated. How? I don't know yet. She touched his cheek. But your father didn't raise quitters. Neither did I. Morning came gray and bitter. Clara left the children with food and instructions to bar the door. The walk to town was longer in daylight. Ice had formed overnight, making the road treacherous. By the time she reached Main Street, her toes were numb. The general store was closed. Clara frowned. Maggie opened at dawn every day, rain or shine. Had for 30 years. She knocked. No answer. Mrs. O'Brien. She tried the door. Locked. Maggie. Footsteps behind her. Clara turned. Nathaniel Cole stood on the boardwalk. 42-years-old blacksmith's arms face that had seen too much. He held his hat in his hands. She's gone, Mrs. Mercer. Clara's blood went cold. What do you mean gone? Store burned last night, around midnight. His voice was flat. Careful. Maggie got out. Barely. She's at my place now. Burns on her hands, smoke in her lungs. The world tilted. Burned. Clara gripped the porch rail. Her ledgers. Her records. Ashes. Nate stepped closer. Everything's gone. Clara stared at the closed door. Behind it, Maggie's life work. 30 years of records. Every transaction. Every contract. Every witness signature. Gone. It wasn't an accident, was it? Nate's jaw tightened. Fire started in the back room, where she kept the old files. He glanced down the street. Whitfield's men were seen riding out of town around 11 last night. Nobody saying anything, though. Too scared. Clara's hands shook. He knew. He knew she might have the copies. Seems that way. So he burned her out. Rage built in her chest. He burned an innocent woman's livelihood to cover his crimes. That's the shape of it. Nate put his hat back on. Mrs. Mercer, you should come with me. Maggie's asking for you. And, he hesitated, I think you should hear what she's got to say. Nate's house was small, but warm. His daughter Abigail answered the door, 16 years old. Dark hair, braided back eyes, too old for her face. She's awake. Abigail led them to a back room. But she's weak. The smoke. Maggie lay on a narrow bed, bandages wrapped around both hands. Her face was gray, her breathing ragged, but her eyes were clear, fierce. Clara, her voice was a rasp. Sit down. Clara sat. Maggie, I'm so sorry. This is my fault. If I hadn't... Stop. Maggie's bandaged hand lifted slightly. Nothing's your fault except marrying a good man in bad territory. She coughed, winced. I need to tell you something. Before I forget. Before this smoke takes more of my lungs. Tell me what... The fire started in my back room, where I keep the old files. Maggie's eyes locked onto Clara's. But my important papers aren't there. Haven't been for years. Clara leaned forward. What? Henry Peaton, you remember him? Land office clerk, died 3 years back. Maggie's mouth twisted. He and I had an arrangement. Anything important, anything that might matter someday, we kept copies. His safe at the land office, my safe at the church. The church. Father Thornton's been storing documents for me for 15 years. Whitfield doesn't know. Nobody does except the priest. Maggie coughed again, harder this time. Abigail brought water. The copies are there. Everything. Including Samuel's loan signed and witnessed dated October 14, 1886. $1,200. Not a penny more. Hope surged through Clara's chest. Father Thornton has them. Locked in the church safe. Whitfield can burn every building in town, but he won't touch the house of God. Even he isn't that stupid. Maggie's eyes softened. Henry always said the truth has a way of surfacing, like creek water in spring. You just have to dig for it. Clara gripped the edge of the bed. How do I get to the documents? Thornton won't just hand them over. Tell him Maggie O'Brien sent you. Tell him to open the Galway box. She smiled, weak but real. He'll know what it means. What is the Galway box? My insurance, child, against men like Marcus Whitfield who think they can burn their way out of the truth. Maggie's eyes began to close. Now go, before Whitfield figures out his fire didn't work. Clara stood, hesitated. Thank you, Maggie. Don't thank me yet. The older woman's voice was fading. Get those papers. Prove what he did. And Clara? Yes. Survive. That's the best revenge. The church stood at the edge of town, white clapboard bright against the gray sky. Clara climbed the steps, her heart pounding. The door was locked. She knocked, waited. Footsteps inside. The door opened. Father Josiah Thornton was 45, balding, with kind eyes that had grown cautious over years of navigating between power and principle. Mrs. Mercer. His voice was careful. I heard about Maggie. Terrible thing. I need to speak with you, Father. Inside. He hesitated. I'm not sure that's... Maggie O'Brien sent me. Clara kept her voice low. She said to tell you to open the Galway box. Thornton's face went pale. He stepped back. Let her in. The church smelled of candle wax and old wood. Thornton led her to the vestry, closed the door. Where did you hear that name? From Maggie. 20 minutes ago. Clara faced him. She's alive, Father. Burned but alive. And she told me you have documents that can save my children's home. Thornton rubbed his face. Mrs. Mercer, you don't understand. If Whitfield learns I've been storing evidence against him, he burned Maggie's store, with her inside. Clara's voice hardened. How long before he comes for you, for your church, for everyone who's ever crossed him? I have a congregation to protect. So protect them. She stepped closer. Open the box. Give me Samuel's loan documents. Let me prove what Whitfield did. If I fail, you lost nothing. But if I succeed, if you succeed, Whitfield goes to prison. Yes. Thornton was silent for a long moment. Through the walls, the wind howled. Finally, he moved to a cabinet, knelt, pressed something at the base. A panel slid open. Inside, a metal strongbox. He lifted it out, set it on the desk. His hands trembled as he worked the lock. The lid opened. Inside papers. Dozens of them. Organized with dates, names, descriptions. Maggie and Henry started this 30 years ago. Thornton's voice was quiet. Insurance, they called it. Against men who thought money made them gods. He sorted through the stack, pulled a folder. Mercer Samuel, loan documentation, October 1886. Clara took it, opened it. The original contract stared back at her. Samuel's handwriting, his signature. The flourish on the M she'd watched him practice. $1,200 principal, 8% interest simple. Witnessed by Magdalena O'Brien and Henry Peaton. No additional fees, no compound interest, no $3,000 debt. Clara's hands shook. This is it. Her voice was barely a whisper. This proves he forged everything. It proves more than that. Thornton pointed to a second page in the folder. Henry added this after Samuel died. A note documenting Whitfield's visit to the land office 2 weeks after the funeral. He requested copies of all Mercer documents. Said it was for estate settlement. Henry gave him the copies, but kept his own notes. Clara read the note. Henry's careful handwriting detailed everything, the date, the time, Whitfield's specific requests. He was already planning it. Clara's jaw clenched. Before Samuel was cold in the ground. Marcus Whitfield plans everything. Thornton closed the strongbox. But he didn't plan for Henry's paranoia, or Maggie's stubbornness, or... He looked at Clara. Or a widow who won't give up. Clara tucked the folder inside her coat. When does Judge Hayes arrive for circuit court? 3 weeks, April 15th. Then I have 3 weeks to stay alive. She moved toward the door. Mrs. Mercer. Thornton's voice stopped her. Whitfield will know you have something. The moment he hears you haven't given up, he'll come for you. Let him. Clara's eyes were steel. I've lost my husband, my savings, my dignity. I've watched my children starve. She opened the door. I have nothing left to lose. That makes me dangerous. She stepped into the cold. The wind hit her face. Snow had started to fall, thick flakes that turned the world white and quiet. Clara walked toward the edge of town. 3 weeks. 21 days to survive. And then Marcus Whitfield would learn what happened when a man pushed a mother too far. The boardwalk ended. Clara stepped onto the frozen road. Behind her the town slept. Ahead the mountains rose white and indifferent. Somewhere between here and home her children waited. She would not fail them. The road home stretched longer than Clara remembered. Snow fell thick now, blurring the pines into white shadows. The documents pressed against her chest beneath her coat, warm from her body heat, heavy with the weight of everything they meant. She was halfway to the cabin when she heard hoofbeats. Clara stopped. Her heart slammed against her ribs. 2 riders emerged from the tree line. She recognized them immediately, Whitfield's men. The same blank faces from the general store. Mrs. Mercer. The first one pulled his horse to a stop. His breath fogged in the cold air. Mr. Whitfield would like a word. Clara's hand moved instinctively to her coat, to the documents. I have nothing to say to Mr. Whitfield. Wasn't a request, ma'am. The second rider circled behind her, cutting off retreat. Clara's mind raced. The cabin was still a mile away. The children were alone. If she ran, they'd catch her. If she fought, she'd lose. My children are waiting for me. Won't take long. The first rider dismounted. He was tall, thick through the shoulders, hands like slabs of meat. Mr. Whitfield just wants to talk. Clear up some misunderstandings. The only misunderstanding is why I haven't shot him yet. The man's eyes flickered. Something that might have been respect quickly buried. Ma'am, I don't want trouble, but I got orders. Then you'll have to drag me. He sighed, stepped forward. A rifle shot cracked through the air. The man froze. Snow exploded 2 feet from his boots. That was a warning. The voice came from the trees, deep, calm. Next one won't be. Clara turned. Nathaniel Cole emerged from the pines, rifle raised, steam rising from the barrel. His daughter Abigail was behind him, holding the reins of 2 horses. Nate! The first rider's voice tightened. This ain't your concern. Made it my concern. Nate walked closer, rifle steady. Mrs. Mercer is under my protection. Has been since her husband saved my daughter's life. Whitfield won't like this. Whitfield can go to hell. Nate stopped 10 feet from the riders. His eyes were flat, cold. You got 2 choices. Ride back and tell your boss he's got no business with this woman. Or stay here and find out what a .45 caliber does to a man's chest at this range. The riders exchanged glances. Clara held her breath. Finally, the first man mounted his horse. His jaw worked, but he said nothing. The 2 of them turned, spurred their horses, and disappeared into the falling snow. Silence settled over the road. Clara's legs nearly buckled. She braced herself against a tree, breathing hard. You all right? Nate lowered the rifle. You followed me. Maggie asked me to. He moved closer. His eyes scanned her face, checking for damage. Said you'd be too stubborn to ask for help. She was right. Nate almost smiled. Usually is. He gestured toward the horses Abigail was holding. Come on, I'll take you home. Make sure those children are safe. Clara hesitated. Why are you doing this? Whitfield could destroy you. Your business, Your daughter? My wife died 3 years ago. Nate's voice was quiet, matter of fact. Consumption. Samuel Mercer rode through a blizzard to treat her, stayed 3 days, wouldn't take payment. He met Clara's eyes. She died anyway, but not alone, not in pain, because of your husband. Clara's throat tightened. Some debts don't settle with money, Mrs. Mercer. I owed Samuel. Now I owe you. He offered his hand. Clara took it, let him help her onto the horse. They rode in silence through the falling snow. Abigail followed her young face, serious, watchful. By the time they reached the cabin, the light was fading. Eli stood at the window, face pressed to the glass. When he saw Clara, his whole body sagged with relief. She dismounted before the horse fully stopped. Ran to the door. Eli opened it, and she pulled him into her arms so hard he grunted. "Mama!" His voice was muffled against her shoulder. "You were gone so long. I thought, I'm here." She kissed his hair. "I'm here." Grace appeared behind her brother, still silent, but her eyes were bright, alert. She pressed against Clara's side, small hands gripping her coat. Nate dismounted, tied the horses to the fence post. Abigail joined him. "Mind if we come in?" Nate's voice was gentle. "Cold out here, and I think we need to talk." Clara nodded. Eli put water on for coffee. Grace find the extra blankets. The cabin was small but warm now that the fire had been burning all day. Clara settled everyone around the hearth, Nate in Samuel's old chair. Abigail beside Grace on the bench. Eli standing guard by the door like a tiny soldier. Clara pulled the documents from her coat, spread them on the table. "This is the original loan contract." Samuel's signature, Maggie's witness marked the real terms. She pointed to the numbers. $1,200, not $3,000. Nate leaned forward, studied the paper. His jaw tightened. "Where'd you get this?" "Father Thornton. Maggie had been storing copies at the church for years." Clara's voice was steady despite the trembling in her hands. "Henry Peaton, the old land office clerk, he kept records too. Documented everything, including Whitfield's visit to collect Samuel's papers after the funeral. Smart man Henry. Dead man now." Clara sat back. 3 years gone. Maggie's burned out of her store. Anyone else who might have helped is either scared silent or in Whitfield's pocket. Nate was quiet for a long moment. The fire crackled. Outside wind rattled the shutters. "Judge Hayes arrives in 3 weeks. I know. Whitfield will try to stop you before then. I know that too." Nate looked at her, really looked. "You got a plan?" Clara almost laughed. "Survive, get to the hearing, show the judge these documents. Pray he's honest." "Hayes is honest." Nate rubbed his jaw. "Lost his arm at Gettysburg, spent 20 years on the bench. He doesn't like liars, and he really doesn't like rich men who think they're above the law. You know him. Served under him. Different lifetime." Nate's eyes went distant for a moment. "He's fair. Maybe the fairest man I ever met. But he follows evidence. You'll need more than these papers. You'll need witnesses, testimony. Someone who can stand up in public and say they saw Whitfield forge those documents." Clara's hope flickered. Who would do that? Everyone's terrified of him. Not everyone. Nate glanced at his daughter. "Abigail." The girl straightened. "I heard them 2 weeks ago at the store. Mr. Whitfield and that clerk from the bank, Yancey, the one with the ink-stained fingers." Clara's breath caught. "You heard them?" "I was buying ribbon. They didn't know I was there." Abigail's voice was steady, older than her years. "Whitfield told Yancey to adjust the Mercer account. Add fees, change the interest calculation. Yancey said it wasn't legal. Whitfield said nobody would ever know." The room went silent. Clara stared at the girl. "You'd testify to that in front of the whole town." Abigail lifted her chin. "Dr. Mercer saved my life when I was 12. Fever nearly killed me. He sat with me all night, cooling my forehead, telling me stories to keep me calm. Her eyes glistened. I owe him, and I don't like bullies. Nate put his hand on his daughter's shoulder. Pride and fear warred in his expression. She's 16, Clara said quietly. If she testifies against Whitfield, she'll be protected. Nate's voice was iron. I'll make sure of it. Pa, Abigail touched his hand. I can speak for myself. I know you can. He squeezed her fingers. That's what scares me. Clara looked between them. Father and daughter bound by loss and love, and the stubborn courage that grew in hard soil. Thank you. The words felt inadequate. Both of you. Nate stood. Don't thank us yet. We got 3 weeks of hell ahead, and Whitfield's not going to make it easy. He moved toward the door. I'll come by tomorrow. We'll work out a schedule, someone here at all times watching the road. If his men come back, you fire a shot. I'll hear it. You can't guard us forever. Don't have to. Nate put on his hat. Just have to get you to April 15th. He opened the door. Cold air rushed in. Abigail followed, pausing to squeeze Grace's hand. She'll talk again, Abigail said quietly to Clara. When she feels safe. Grief does that to children. Makes them go inside themselves. She smiled, sad and knowing. I didn't speak for a month after my mother died. Then one day I just did. The door closed behind them. Clara stood in the sudden silence, her children pressed close. The documents spread across the table. 3 weeks. 21 days until the hearing. 21 days of Marcus Whitfield trying to destroy her. She looked at Eli, at Grace, at the cabin Samuel had built with his own hands. We're going to be all right, she said. Eli's eyes were too old for 11. You don't know that, Mama. No. Clara pulled them both close. But I believe it, and sometimes that has to be enough. The next morning brought brittle sunshine and a visitor Clara didn't expect. She was feeding the chickens when the wagon appeared on the ridge. Single horse, careful driver. Not Whitfield's men, they rode fast and careless. Clara's hand moved to the rifle propped against the coop. She watched the wagon descend, squinting against the glare off the snow. The driver was a woman. Gray hair under a black bonnet, spine straight, despite the rough road. As she drew closer, Clara recognized her. Harriet Whitfield, Marcus's sister. Clara's grip tightened on the rifle. The wagon stopped 20 feet from the cabin. Harriet didn't dismount immediately. She sat there, hands folded in her lap as if gathering courage. Mrs. Mercer. Her voice was thin, nervous. I need to speak with you. I have nothing to say to anyone named Whitfield. I understand. Harriet's face was pale, pinched. But please, what I have to tell you, it could help. Clara studied her. Harriet was 48, had lived with her brother since her husband died a decade ago. She ran his household, managed his social calendar, smiled at his guests. Clara had always thought her a willing accomplice, but the woman in the wagon didn't look willing. She looked afraid. 5 minutes. Clara didn't lower the rifle. Say what you came to say. Harriet climbed down from the wagon. Her movements were stiff, her dress plain black, her gloves worn at the fingertips, not the clothes of a wealthy man's sister. I know what Marcus is doing to you. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. I know about the forged documents, the inflated debt, the fire at Mrs. O'Brien's store. Clara's heart hammered. If you know, why haven't you stopped him? Because I'm trapped. Harriet's composure cracked. Her eyes welled. I have no money of my own. No property. Everything I have Marcus provides. If I defy him, I'm destitute. She pulled a handkerchief from her sleeve, dabbed her eyes. But I can't stay silent anymore. Not after the fire. Maggie could have died. She almost did. I know. Harriet's voice shook. That's why I'm here. She reached into her coat, pulled out a small leather journal. Marcus keeps records. detailed records. Every transaction, every bribe, every forged signature. She held the journal out like an offering. He doesn't know I know where he keeps it. He thinks I'm too stupid to understand what I'm reading. Clara took the journal. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Pages of numbers, names, dates, amounts paid to officials, documents altered, properties seized. The Mercer case was there detailed in Marcus's own handwriting. Original debt, $1,200. Adjusted debt, $3,200. Reason railway access. Target acquisition date, April 1st, before the hearing. He'd planned to take her land before she could fight. This is everything. Clara's voice came out strangled. This is proof of every crime he's committed. 20 years worth. Harriet's chin lifted slightly. Every person he's destroyed. Every family he's broken. It's all there. Clara looked up from the journal. Why give this to me? Harriet was silent for a long moment. The wind stirred her bonnet. Her eyes went distant. My husband died 10 years ago. Consumption, they said. But Marcus had been pressuring him to sell the family mine. Tom refused. Said he'd rather die than let Marcus profit from his father's legacy. Her voice hardened. 2 weeks later, Tom was dead. The doctor said consumption, but I saw the way Marcus smiled at the funeral. Clara's blood went cold. You think I think my husband would be alive if he'd sold that mine. Harriet's eyes met Clara's. I think your husband would be alive if he'd sold that land. The words hung in the frozen air. Samuel died of typhoid. Samuel died treating Marcus's miners who'd been working in flooded tunnels because Marcus refused to install proper drainage. Harriet's voice broke. Your husband didn't catch that fever by accident, Mrs. Mercer. He caught it because Marcus let those men sicken, then begged the one doctor in 50 miles to save them. The world tilted. Clara gripped the porch rail. The journal nearly slipped from her fingers. Samuel's face swam in her memory. The morning he'd left, worried but determined. I have to go, Clara. They're dying. Had Whitfield known? Had he counted on Samuel's dedication, his inability to turn away from suffering? Had he killed her husband without ever touching him? I can't prove it. Harriet's voice cut through Clara's spiral. I have suspicions, nothing more. But this... She pointed to the journal. This is proof of everything else. Every crime, every theft, every lie. Clara forced herself to breathe. In, out. The cold air burned her lungs. If I use this, Whitfield will know you gave it to me. Yes. He'll destroy you. He already has. Harriet's smile was bitter. He destroyed me 10 years ago when he killed my husband. I've just been pretending to be alive ever since. She stepped back toward the wagon. Use the journal. Bring it to Judge Hayes. End Marcus before he ends anyone else. Where will you go? Harriet climbed into the wagon seat. I have a cousin in Oregon. Haven't spoken to her in 15 years, but she'll take me in. She gathered the reins. By the time Marcus realizes the journal is missing, I'll be gone. Clara watched her turn the wagon. At the ridge, Harriet paused, looked back. Mrs. Mercer. Yes. Your husband was a good man, the best I ever knew. Her voice carried across the snow. Don't let Marcus win. The wagon disappeared over the ridge. Clara stood on the porch, the journal heavy in her hands, her world rewritten by a single conversation. Eli appeared in the doorway. Mama. Who was that? Clara looked at her son, at his father's eyes in a child's face. An ally. She tucked the journal inside her coat, next to Samuel's documents. An unexpected one. That night, Clara spread everything across the table. The original loan contract, Henry Paton's notes, Whitfield's journal, Abigail's promised testimony. Piece by piece, the case built itself. Nate sat across from her, studying each document, with the careful attention of a man who'd spent years watching evidence make or break lives. This is strong. His voice was gruff. Stronger than anything I've seen brought against a man like Whitfield. Strong enough to win. Nate was quiet for a moment. Depends on the jury. On who shows up to the hearing. On whether Whitfield's bought anyone we don't know about. You're not encouraging. I'm being honest. He met her eyes. This territory runs on fear, Mrs. Mercer. Whitfield owns the bank, the mining company, half the land office. People depend on him for their livelihoods. Even if they hate him, even if they know he's a criminal, they might not stand against him. So what do? We make sure they have a reason to. Nate leaned forward. Right now, people see this as your fight. The widow against the banker. They feel bad for you, but they're not going to risk their necks for someone else's land. How do I change that? Show them Whitfield's a threat to everyone, not just you. Nate tapped the journal. This has names, dates, other families he's destroyed. If we can find some of them, get them to speak, they'll be too scared. Some will, but some... Nate's jaw tightened. Some have already lost everything. They've got nothing left to fear. Clara thought of Harriet's face. The quiet devastation of a woman who'd been destroyed so slowly she hadn't noticed until it was complete. How many families? I can think of 3 off the top of my head. The Sullivans lost their ranch 2 years ago. The Chen family lost their laundry last spring. Old man Gonzalez lost his grazing rights in '86. Nate stood. I'll ride out tomorrow. Talk to them. See who's willing to stand up. And if none of them are, then we go in with what we have. He put on his hat. But I think you'll be surprised, Mrs. Mercer. Courage is contagious. Sometimes all people need is someone to go first. He left. Clara sat alone in the lamplight, surrounded by paper and proof and the weight of everything she was about to attempt. On the bench by the fire, Grace had fallen asleep. Eli sat beside her, whittling a piece of wood with Samuel's old knife. Eli. He looked up. Are you scared? Her son was quiet for a long moment. The knife stilled in his hands. Yes. His voice was small, honest. But Pa always said being scared don't mean being weak. It means you understand what's at stake. Clara's heart ached. When did he tell you that? The night before he left for the mining camp. Eli went back to whittling. He said he was scared too, scared of the typhoid, scared of leaving us. The knife scraped against wood. But he went anyway, because sometimes the right thing and the safe thing aren't the same. Tears burned Clara's eyes. She didn't try to stop them. Your father was the bravest man I ever knew. I know. Eli's voice cracked. I'm trying to be like him. Clara crossed to the bench, sat beside her son, put her arm around his thin shoulders. You already are. They sat together in the firelight, the wind howling outside the documents waiting on the table. 2 weeks until the hearing. 2 weeks to gather an army of the broken and the brave. 2 weeks to decide the future. Clara closed her eyes, felt her children's warmth against her side. She would not fail them. She would not fail Samuel. And she would not let Marcus Whitfield win. The next morning, Clara woke to pounding on the door. She grabbed the rifle, heart hammering. Who's there? It's Nate. Open up. She unbarred the door. Nate stood on the porch breathing hard, his horse lathered behind him. Whitfield's called a town meeting, tonight, at the church. Clara's blood went cold. What kind of meeting? The kind where he tries to turn the whole town against you before you can reach the judge. Nate's jaw was tight. He's going to make his case first. Paint you as unstable, dangerous, unfit to raise children. The words hit like a fist. My children. He's going to argue for emergency custody, claims you're neglecting them, claims they'd be better off in his care until the property matter is settled. Nate's eyes were dark with fury. It's a move to neutralize you. Take your children, break your spirit. Clara's vision tunneled. She gripped the doorframe to stay upright. He can't. He wouldn't dare. He's daring right now. Nate stepped closer. You have to be there tonight. You have to fight. With what? I'm a widow with no money and no allies. He owns this town. You have allies. Nate's voice hardened. Me, Abigail, Father Thornton, Maggie if she can stand. He gripped Clara's shoulder. And you have the truth. That's more than Whitfield has ever had. Clara looked past him, at the white mountains, the endless snow, the world that had taken everything from her. Then she looked at her children. Eli standing fierce in the doorway. Grace watching with wide eyes. What time? 7 o'clock? Clara straightened. Then I'll be there. She walked back into the cabin, pulled on her heaviest coat, checked the documents hidden in the floorboard. Tonight she would face Marcus Whitfield. Tonight she would fight for her children. And if she had to burn his world down to save them, she would strike the match herself. The church was packed by the time Clara arrived. Every pew filled, people standing along the walls, faces lit by flickering oil lamps. The air smelled of wet wool and wood smoke, and something else, fear thick as fog. Clara pushed through the door with Eli and Grace pressed close to her sides. Heads turned. Whispers rippled through the crowd like wind through wheat. That's her. Poor thing, she looks half dead. Heard she's gone mad with grief. Clara kept her chin high. Her heart slammed against her ribs, but she wouldn't let them see her shake. Nate was waiting near the front, Abigail beside him. He nodded once. A small reassurance in a room full of hostility. Marcus Whitfield stood at the altar, hands clasped behind his back, expression arranged in careful sorrow. Father Thornton sat to his left, face, pale eyes avoiding Clara's. Mrs. Mercer, Whitfield's voice carried across the church, warm and welcoming. A spider greeting a fly. Thank you for joining us. Please sit. Clara didn't sit. I'll stand. A murmur went through the crowd. Whitfield's smile tightened, almost imperceptibly. As you wish. He turned to address the congregation. Friends, neighbors, I've called this meeting because I'm deeply concerned. Not about property or debts, those are matters for the courts. I'm concerned about children. He paused, let the word settle. 2 children to be precise. Eli and Grace Mercer. His gaze swept to where they stood, small and pale, against Clara's black coat. Innocent souls who've suffered terribly since their father's passing. Clara's hands curled into fists. Don't you dare speak about my children. Mrs. Mercer, please. Whitfield raised a placating hand. I understand your emotions are running high. That's precisely what concerns me. He addressed the crowd again. Many of you have seen Mrs. Mercer in recent weeks. You've seen her state of mind, the desperation, the wild accusations. Those accusations are true, and you know it. She's accused me of forgery. Whitfield's voice rose with practiced indignation. Of theft, of arson, without a shred of evidence. He shook his head sadly. This is not the behavior of a stable woman. This is grief twisted into madness. The whispers grew louder. Clara caught fragments. Poor dear. Needs help. Those babies. I've consulted with Judge Hayes, Whitfield continued. He agrees that in cases of parental instability, the welfare of children must come first. I'm prepared to offer temporary guardianship until Mrs. Mercer receives the care she needs. Temporary guardianship? Clara's voice cut through the murmurs like a blade. You mean you want to steal my children the same way you're trying to steal my land? Gasps rippled through the congregation. Whitfield's mask slipped for just a moment, a flash of cold fury in his eyes. Then it was back, smooth and sorrowful. Mrs. Mercer, these outbursts only prove my point. You're unwell. The children deserve stability. The children deserve their mother. Clara stepped forward. A mother who has fed them, clothed them, kept them alive through the hardest winter of our lives. A mother who hasn't abandoned them to chase money and power. No one is accusing you of abandonment. You're accusing me of madness. Clara's voice shook with rage. Because I won't lie down and let you take everything my husband built. Because I have the audacity to fight back. Father Thornton shifted uncomfortably. The crowd was restless now, uncertain. Clara could feel the tide beginning to turn. Whitfield sensed it too. His voice hardened slightly. "Mrs. Mercer, I've tried to be patient. I've tried to be kind, but you leave me no choice." He turned to the congregation. "I'm asking for a vote. All those in favor of emergency custody." "No." The voice came from the back of the church, strong, clear, familiar. Clara turned. Maggie O'Brien stood in the doorway, bandaged hands gripping a cane face gray, but eyes blazing. Nate moved to support her, but she waved him off. "Maggie." Whitfield's composure cracked. "You should be resting." "I'll rest when I'm dead." Maggie limped down the aisle, each step deliberate, painful. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. "Which would have been last week if your men had done their job properly." The church went silent. "My men—" Whitfield's voice was ice. "I don't know what you're implying." "I'm not implying anything." Maggie stopped 3 feet from him. "I'm stating facts. Your men set fire to my store. They waited until I was asleep in the back room, then they torched it. I barely got out alive." "That's a serious accusation." "It's the truth." Maggie turned to face the congregation. "Marcus Whitfield has been stealing from this town for 20 years, forging documents, inflating debts, destroying anyone who gets in his way." Her bandaged hand gestured to Clara. "This woman isn't mad. She's the first person brave enough to stand up to him." The whispers changed tone. Doubt crept in. Eyes that had avoided Clara's now met hers with something like respect. Whitfield's face had gone red. "This is slander. I'll have you arrested." "On what grounds speaking the truth in church?" Maggie's laugh was harsh. "Go ahead. Arrest a burned-out old woman for telling the congregation what everyone already knows in their hearts." Maggie's right. Another voice. Clara turned again. Miguel Santos stepped forward from the crowd. 50 years old, weathered face, hands calloused from decades of ranching. He'd lost his grazing rights 3 years ago, forced to sell his cattle at a loss. "Whitfield cheated me too." Miguel's voice was steady. "Changed my contracts. Added fees that didn't exist. By the time I figured out what happened, I'd lost everything." "Lies." Whitfield's voice rose. "All lies." "Then why did you pay me $500 last year to keep quiet?" Miguel pulled a paper from his coat. "I kept the receipt. Didn't know what I was saving it for until now." The church erupted. Voices overlapping, accusations flying, decades of suppressed anger finally finding release. Clara stood in the center of the chaos, watching Whitfield's carefully constructed world begin to crack. Then she saw movement near the door. Eli was gone. Her heart stopped. She spun, searching the crowd. Grace still clung to her skirt, but her son had vanished. "Eli." Clara's voice was lost in the noise. "Eli." She pushed through the crowd, dragging Grace behind her. People blocked her path, pressed too close. Panic clawed at her throat. "Eli." The side door of the church hung open. Cold air rushed in. Clara ran. Outside, the night was black and bitter. Snow had started falling again, thick flakes that blurred the world. "Eli." Her voice echoed against the empty street. "Eli, where are you?" A shape moved in the shadows near the livery stable. Clara ran toward it. She found her son crouched behind a water trough, hands pressed over his ears, body shaking with silent sobs. "Eli." Clara dropped to her knees beside him. "Baby, what happened? Why did you run?" "I couldn't." His voice broke. "Everyone was yelling and looking at us like we were broken, and I couldn't breathe, and I just—" Clara pulled him into her arms. His small body heaved against her chest. "I'm sorry, Mama. I'm sorry I ran. I was supposed to be strong like Pa and I couldn't." "Stop." Clara held him tighter. "You are strong. The strongest boy I know." "Then why am I crying?" "Because crying isn't weakness." She pulled back, took his face in her hands. His cheeks were wet, his eyes red. "Your father cried, Eli. The night before he left for the mining camp after you and Grace were asleep, he sat at the table and cried. He was scared and sad, and he cried. Then he wiped his face, and he went anyway. Eli's breath hitched. He did? He did. Clara wiped his tears with her thumb. Being brave doesn't mean you don't feel. It means you feel everything, and you keep going anyway. Grace appeared beside them, silent as always, but her small hand found Eli's, held tight. Clara gathered both children close. Inside the church, voices still rose and fell, the sound of a town tearing itself apart, or maybe, just maybe, putting itself back together. "We need to go back in there," Clara said quietly. Eli pulled away, wiped his face with his sleeve. "I know." "Can you do that?" He squared his shoulders, 11 years old, trying so hard to carry a man's weight. "Yeah, Mama, I can do that." They walked back to the church together. The chaos inside had settled into something else by the time they returned. Not calm exactly, more like the tense silence before a storm breaks or passes. Whitfield stood alone near the altar. His supporters had melted away, unwilling to be seen beside him as the accusations mounted. Father Thornton had moved to stand with Maggie and Nate. Clara pushed through the crowd. People parted for her now. Their eyes had changed, less pity, more respect. "You want to take my children." Clara's voice rang clear through the church. "You claim I'm unfit, unstable, mad with grief." Whitfield said nothing. His jaw was tight, his eyes calculating escape routes. "Let me tell you about madness." Clara stepped closer. "Madness is working 18-hour days in a field because your husband is dead and your children are hungry. Madness is selling your wedding ring for $12 because that's all a widow's love is worth in this territory. Madness is watching a man who killed your husband smile at his funeral and plot to steal his legacy." The crowd shifted. Someone coughed. "My husband went to that mining camp because you begged him to." Clara's voice cracked but held. "Your men were dying because you refused to drain the flooded tunnels, because you cared more about profit than their lives. Samuel went to save them, and he caught the fever that killed him. You didn't pull the trigger, but you loaded the gun." Whitfield's face had gone gray. "You can't prove that." "I can prove everything else." Clara pulled the journal from her coat, held it up so the whole congregation could see. "Your own records, Marcus. 20 years of crimes, every document you forged, every family you destroyed, every bribe you paid." Whitfield lunged for the journal. Nate was faster. He stepped between them, one massive hand catching Whitfield's wrist. "Don't!" Whitfield wrenched free. His composure was gone now, replaced by something ugly. Desperate. "That's stolen property. She broke into my home. I gave it to her." Every head turned toward the church door. Harriet Whitfield stood on the threshold. She looked different than she had at Clara's cabin, taller somehow, as if a weight had been lifted. Her black dress was travel-worn, her face pale but determined. "Harriet." Whitfield's voice dropped to a growl. "What are you doing?" "The right thing." Harriet walked down the aisle. Finally, after 10 years of cowardice. She stopped beside Clara. "I gave her the journal. I gave her the proof. And I'll testify to everything I know about your crimes, brother." The word twisted between them, loaded with decades of pain. "You'll destroy yourself," Whitfield snarled. "You think anyone will take you in when this is over? You'll be alone, penniless." "I'm already alone." Harriet's voice didn't waver. "I've been alone since you killed my husband." The church went utterly silent. Whitfield's face contorted. "I didn't. You let those tunnels flood because drainage was expensive. Tom's mind connected to yours. The water rose. He went down to try to stop it." Harriet's eyes glistened, but her voice held steady. "They said it was an accident. Cave-in. But you knew. You knew the tunnels were unstable. You knew, and you did nothing." Clara felt sick. The pattern was horrifyingly clear. Samuel, Tom. How many others? This is madness. Whitfield's voice had gone shrill. All of you listening to these hysterical women. We're listening. The voice came from the congregation. The blacksmith standing with his arms crossed. Keep talking, Whitfield. We want to hear what you've got to say. I've got nothing to say to a mob. Then say it to a judge. Father Thornton stepped forward, his earlier cowardice replaced by quiet resolve. Judge Hayes arrives in 2 weeks. Let him hear the evidence. Let him decide who's telling the truth. Whitfield's eyes darted around the church, looking for allies, finding none. This isn't over. He grabbed his coat from a pew. None of you have any idea what you're doing. This town runs on my money, my bank, my contracts. He shouldered toward the door. You'll regret this, all of you. The door slammed behind him. No one moved. Then slowly the congregation began to breathe again. Maggie was the first to speak. Well, that went better than expected. Clara's legs gave out. She sank onto the nearest pew, the journal still clutched in her hands. Eli and Grace pressed close on either side. Father Thornton approached, his face ashen. Mrs. Mercer, I owe you an apology. When Whitfield pressured me, I should have— You kept Maggie's documents safe. Clara's voice was exhausted. That's what matters. Nate crouched in front of her. You all right? No. Clara laughed, the sound brittle. I just accused the most powerful man in the territory of murder in front of the whole town. I'm terrified. Good. Nate's mouth twitched. Means you're not stupid. Harriet stood apart from the group, arms wrapped around herself. Clara rose, crossed to her. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. Harriet's voice was quiet. I've been silent for 10 years, watching him destroy people, telling myself it wasn't my responsibility. Her eyes met Clara's. Your husband came to our house once. Did you know that Marcus was sick, just a cold, nothing serious, but he was whining like a child? Samuel came at midnight in the rain to bring him medicine. Clara's throat tightened. He sat with Marcus for an hour, talking, listening. When he left, he looked at me and said, Your brother is lonely, Mrs. Whitfield. Lonely people do desperate things. Keep an eye on him. Harriet's voice cracked. I didn't listen. I thought I was keeping the peace, but I was just enabling a monster. Clara took Harriet's bandaged hand. You're listening now. The church slowly emptied. People filed out in small groups, voices low, glancing back at Clara with expressions she couldn't quite read. Fear, hope, the beginning of something that might eventually become courage. Miguel Santos stopped beside her on his way out. My wife makes good tamales, Mrs. Mercer. I'll have her bring some by tomorrow. Clara blinked. You don't have to. I know. Miguel's weathered face softened. But we've all been scared for too long. Time to start being neighbors again. He tipped his hat and walked into the night. One by one, others followed. The Sullivan widow who'd lost her ranch 2 years ago. The Chen family who'd lost their laundry. Old man Gonzalez who'd lost his grazing rights. They didn't say much, a nod, a touch on the shoulder, a murmured, thank you. Clara accepted each gesture, too numb to fully process what was happening. The tide was turning. Finally, only Clara's small group remained. Maggie leaning heavily on her cane. Nate and Abigail. Harriet uncertain of where she belonged. Father Thornton wringing his hands. And the children. Eli standing tall, despite his earlier breakdown. Grace still silent, but holding Clara's hand with fierce determination. What now? Nate asked. Clara looked at the altar, at the cross hanging above it, at the lamplight flickering against the stained glass windows. We wait, she said. 2 weeks until the hearing. 2 weeks for Whitfield to try something desperate. You think he will? Clara thought of Whitfield's face as he'd stormed out. The rage. The fear. I know he will. Then we stay together. Nate's voice was firm. No one goes anywhere alone. The children don't leave your sight. If Whitfield wants to make a move, he'll have to go through all of us. Clara nodded. The exhaustion was crashing over her, now wave after wave. "Take me home," she whispered. Nate lifted Grace into his arms. Abigail took Eli's hand. Harriet helped Maggie toward the door. They walked out of the church together. The snow had stopped. The sky was clearing, stars emerging one by one. Clara paused on the steps, looking up at the cold, bright points of light. Somewhere up there she hoped Samuel was watching. Hoped he could see what she'd done. What she was about to do. "I'm fighting," she whispered to the sky. "Just like you taught me." The stars didn't answer. But the wind gentled, and for one moment, Clara felt something that might have been peace. Then she climbed into the wagon, gathered her children close, and rode toward home. 2 weeks. 14 days until everything changed. She was ready. The next morning brought a different kind of visitor. Clara was feeding the chickens when the horse appeared on the ridge. Single rider, moving slow. Not Whitfield's men, she knew their style by now, fast and aggressive. This rider was careful, deliberate. She shaded her eyes against the morning sun. The rider was young, maybe 20. Clean-shaven, serious face, wearing clothes that looked official. He carried a leather satchel across his chest. "Mrs. Mercer." He pulled his horse to a stop near the fence. Clara's hand rested on the rifle she'd learned to keep close. "Who's asking?" "Benjamin Cross." He dismounted. "I'm a clerk for Judge Hayes. The judge sent me ahead to take preliminary statements." Clara studied him. The name, the features. Cross. Any relation to the judge? His nephew. Benjamin almost smiled. He wanted someone he could trust. Clara relaxed slightly. "Come inside. I'll make coffee." They sat at the table while the coffee brewed. Eli watched from the loft, suspicious. Grace played quietly by the fire, still silent, but more alert each day. Benjamin pulled papers from his satchel. "Mrs. Mercer, the judge has received multiple documents relating to your case. The original loan contract. Mr. Peaton's notes. The journal allegedly belonging to Marcus Whitfield. Allegedly. Legal language." Benjamin's eyes met hers. "Between us, my uncle believes you. But he needs testimony to support the physical evidence. Witnesses who can speak to Whitfield's character, his methods. I have witnesses. Maggie O'Brien, Miguel Santos, others. I'll need their statements." Benjamin set down his pen. "There's something else. Something the judge wanted me to tell you privately." Clara's coffee cup stilled halfway to her lips. "Whitfield has filed a countersuit. Claims you've defamed him, stolen his property, and incited a mob against him." Benjamin's voice was careful. "He's also renewed his petition for emergency custody of your children." The cup hit the table. Coffee splashed across the wood. He can file whatever he wants. Whether it succeeds is another matter." Benjamin mopped up the spill with his handkerchief. "The judge wanted you to know so you're not blindsided at the hearing." Clara's hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against the table. "What are his chances?" "Slim, if your evidence holds. But Whitfield has money. Money buys lawyers, delays complications." Benjamin's expression was sympathetic. "This isn't going to be clean, Mrs. Mercer. Or quick. Even if you win the main case, the custody petition could drag on for months." Months. Months of uncertainty. Months of her children's future hanging by a thread. "There has to be something we can do." "There is." Benjamin lowered his voice. "Find more witnesses. The more people who speak against Whitfield, the harder it becomes for any judge to ignore the pattern." He gathered his papers. "I'll be in town for the next 2 weeks taking statements. Send anyone who's willing to talk." Clara walked him to the door. "Mr. Cross." She stopped him on the porch. "Your uncle, is he really as fair as people say?" Benjamin's face softened. "My uncle lost his arm at Gettysburg, spent 3 months in a Confederate prison. When he got home, his fiancée had married another man. His family's farm was burned and everyone told him to give up. He mounted his horse. He didn't. Taught himself to write left-handed. Put himself through law school. Became a judge because he believed the law should protect people, not just punish them. Clara felt something loosen in her chest. So, yes, Mrs. Mercer. Benjamin gathered his reins. He's fair, but more than that, he's stubborn, and he really doesn't like bullies. He rode away. Clara stood on the porch, watching until he disappeared over the ridge. 2 weeks. She would spend every day of it building her case, gathering witnesses, making sure Whitfield couldn't slither free. And when Judge Hayes arrived, she would be ready. The days blurred together. Clara rose before dawn and worked until after dark, visiting neighbors, collecting statements, reviewing documents with Nate and Maggie. Word spread. Slowly at first, then faster. People who'd been silent for years began to talk. Stories emerged: debts, inflated contracts, altered families destroyed. Each account added another brick to the wall she was building around Whitfield, but he wasn't idle. 3 days before the hearing, Clara woke to find her chickens slaughtered. Their bodies lay scattered across the yard, throats cut. No note, no message. None was needed. 4 days before the hearing, someone poisoned Nate's horse. The animal survived barely, but couldn't walk. 2 days before the hearing, a rock crashed through Clara's window at midnight. Wrapped around it, a single page from Whitfield's journal, the page documenting his crimes against her specifically. A message: I know what you have. I know what you're planning. Clara nailed boards over the broken window and didn't sleep. The night before the hearing, Eli found her sitting at the table staring at Samuel's medical case. "Mama." She looked up. Her son stood in the lamplight, too thin, too serious, too old for his years. "I couldn't sleep." She gestured to the chair beside her. "Sit with me." He sat. They were quiet for a long moment. The fire crackled. Outside wind rattled the boarded window. "Mama." Eli's voice was small. "What if we lose?" Clara had asked herself the same question 100 times. 1,000. "Then we lose." She took his hand. "We pack what we can carry. We find somewhere else to live. We start over." "But Pa built this. He wanted us to have it." "Your father wanted us to be happy." Clara squeezed his fingers. "He wanted us to be safe. He wanted you and Grace to grow up knowing you were loved." She turned to face him. "A house is just wood and nails, Eli. Land is just dirt. What matters, the only thing that matters, is that we stay together." Eli's eyes glistened. "I don't want to leave. This is home." "I know, baby." Clara pulled him close. "I don't want to leave either. And we're going to fight with everything we have. But win or lose, we'll still have each other. No one can take that. Not Whitfield, not anyone." Eli pressed his face against her shoulder. His body shook with silent sobs. Clara held him until the shaking stopped, until his breathing steadied, until he pulled away and wiped his face with the back of his hand. "I'll be brave tomorrow," he said. "You're brave every day." Clara kissed his forehead. "Now go to sleep. Tomorrow we finish this." She watched him climb back to the loft, heard him settle onto his pallet, heard his breathing slow. Then she turned back to Samuel's case. She opened it slowly. The smell washed over her: carbolic acid and peppermint. Her husband's hands, his voice, his warmth. Clara lifted his stethoscope, pressed it against her heart. "I'm scared," she whispered to the empty room. "I'm so scared, Samuel. I don't know if I'm strong enough." The fire popped. The wind howled. No answer came. But as Clara closed the case and finally lay down to sleep, she could have sworn she felt a hand brush her hair, a whisper against her ear. "You are." Morning came cold and clear. Clara dressed in her best black dress, worn but clean mended at the hem. She braided her hair tight, pinned it up. Looked at herself in the small mirror Samuel had bought her on their wedding day. She barely recognized the woman staring back. Thin, hollow-eyed, hard in ways she'd never been before, but alive, fighting, still standing. "Mama!" Grace's voice came from behind her. Clara turned. Her daughter stood in the doorway. For the first time in weeks, Grace's eyes were bright, alert, present. "Mama!" Grace said again. The word came out rusty, unused. "We're going to win." Clara's heart stopped. She crossed the room, knelt before her daughter, took her small face in both hands. "Grace, baby." Tears streamed down Clara's cheeks. "You're talking." "I had to." Grace's voice was stronger now. "I had to tell you. Papa came to me in a dream. He said we're going to win." Clara gathered her daughter close, held her so tight she could feel both their hearts beating. Behind them, Eli climbed down from the loft. His eyes went wide. "Gracie." "I'm okay." Grace reached for her brother's hand. "I'm okay now." The three of them stood together in the morning light. Mother and children. All that remained of Samuel Mercer's family. All that mattered. Clara wiped her eyes, straightened her spine. "Let's go," she said. "Let's finish this." The town square had transformed overnight. Benches arranged in rows, a raised platform, where the judge would sit, the whole space open to the April sky. By 9 o'clock, 200 people had gathered, farmers in mud-caked boots, women in worn shawls, children perched on fence rails. The entire territory had come to watch. Clara walked through the crowd with her children pressed close. Eli held Grace's hand, his jaw set, eyes forward. Grace walked with a new steadiness. Her voice restored, her silence finally broken. Nate met them at the front. Abigail stood beside him, pale but determined. Behind them, Maggie sat on a bench, her bandaged hands folded in her lap, her cane propped against her knee. "You ready?" Nate's voice was low. Clara's heart hammered. Her mouth was dry. Every instinct screamed at her to run. "No," she said. "But I'm here anyway." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Clara turned. Marcus Whitfield had arrived. He walked through the square like a king entering his throne room. His suit was immaculate, his hair oiled, his expression carefully arranged in wounded dignity. 2 lawyers flanked him, hired men from Helena, faces sharp as knives. Their eyes met across the crowd. Whitfield's mouth curved into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. A predator's smile. Confident. Patient. Clara didn't look away. "All rise!" The crowd shuffled to its feet. Judge Walter Edmund Hayes climbed the platform steps, his empty sleeve pinned to his coat, his face weathered by 60 years of hard living and harder justice. He settled into his chair, surveyed the crowd. His eyes lingered on Clara, then Whitfield, then back to the assembled witnesses. "Be seated." Everyone sat. The silence was absolute. Hayes opened a leather folder. "The matter before this court concerns the foreclosure petition filed by First National Bank against the estate of Samuel Mercer, deceased. Mrs. Clara Mercer contests this petition, claiming the debt documents are fraudulent." He looked up. "Additionally, there are counterclaims of defamation, theft, and a petition for emergency custody of minor children." Clara's stomach clenched. Beside her, Eli's hand found hers. "We'll begin with the foreclosure matter." Hayes nodded to Whitfield's lawyers. "Mr. Preston, present your case." The taller lawyer rose. His voice was smooth, practiced, designed to sound reasonable even when it wasn't. "Your Honor, this case is simple. Samuel Mercer borrowed $3,200 from First National Bank in October 1886. He made partial payments before his death. The remaining balance, plus accumulated interest and fees, totals $4,100. Mrs. Mercer has failed to pay this debt. The bank is entitled to seize the property as collateral." He placed a document on the judge's table. The loan agreement signed by Samuel Mercer, witnessed by bank officials. Hayes examined the paper. His expression revealed nothing. Mrs. Mercer, your response. Clara stood. Her legs trembled, but her voice came out steady. That document is a forgery. Whispers swept through the crowd. Preston's smile tightened. Your Honor, Mrs. Mercer has made wild accusations without evidence. I have evidence. Clara reached into her satchel. The original loan agreement signed by my husband on October 14, 1886, witnessed by Magdalena O'Brien and Henry Peaton, notarized by the territorial recorder. She placed the document beside Whitfield's version. The original debt was $1,200, not $3,000. The terms were 8% simple interest. No additional fees, no compounding. Hayes pulled both documents close. His eyes moved between them line by line. These are significantly different. Because one is real and one is fake. Clara's voice hardened. Mr. Whitfield altered the numbers after my husband died. He added fees that didn't exist, changed the interest calculation, inflated the debt by nearly $3,000. Objection. Preston rose. Mrs. Mercer is making accusations she cannot prove. I can prove everything. Clara pulled out Henry Peaton's notes. Mr. Peaton kept records of every document he witnessed. His notes confirmed the original terms, $1,200, simple interest, 2 signatories. She placed the journal on the table. And this is Mr. Whitfield's personal record book. In his own handwriting, he documented every alteration he made to the Mercer account. Original debt $1,200, adjusted debt $3,200, reason railway access. The crowd erupted. Voices rose, overlapping, incredulous. Hayes banged his gavel. Order! I will have order! Silence fell reluctantly. Whitfield had gone pale. His lawyers huddled close, whispering urgently. Hayes examined the journal. His expression darkened with each page. Mr. Whitfield. The judge's voice was ice. Is this your handwriting? Whitfield stood slowly. His composure was cracking, but he held himself together by force of will. Your Honor, that journal was stolen from my home. Mrs. Mercer broke in and I gave it to her. Harriet's voice cut through the square. Every head turned. Whitfield's sister rose from her seat near the back, her face pale but resolute. I took the journal from Marcus's study and gave it to Mrs. Mercer. I witnessed years of his crimes, his forgeries, his manipulations. Her voice broke but held. I watched him destroy families, steal property, ruin lives. I stayed silent because I was afraid. I'm not afraid anymore. Whitfield's face contorted. Harriet, you don't know what you're saying. I know exactly what I'm saying. Harriet stepped forward. I'm saying my brother is a thief and a liar. I'm saying he killed my husband by neglecting the mine drainage. I'm saying he's been stealing from this territory for 20 years, and I have been complicit in my silence. The crowd roared. People leapt to their feet. Hayes banged his gavel repeatedly, but the noise only grew. Clara watched Whitfield's face, watched the mask finally shatter. This was it, the moment everything changed. Order! Hayes's voice thundered across the square. I will clear this court if there is not immediate silence. The crowd subsided, slowly, reluctantly. Hayes turned to Whitfield. His eyes were merciless. Mr. Whitfield, you will answer the question. Is the handwriting in this journal yours? Whitfield's lawyers tried to intervene. Your Honor, our client has a right to. Your client has a right to answer a direct question under oath. Hayes leaned forward. Mr. Whitfield, yes or no? The silence stretched. Every eye in the square fixed on the man who had controlled their lives for 2 decades. Clara held her breath. Yes. The word came out strangled. Yes, it's my handwriting. The crowd inhaled as one. But the entries have been taken out of context. Whitfield's voice rose desperate. I can explain. Then explain. Hayes's voice was flat. Explain why your records show the original Mercer debt as $1,200. Then a note, to adjust for railway acquisition. Explain why Mrs. O'Brien's witness testimony contradicts your filed documents. Explain why your own sister is testifying against you. Whitfield's mouth opened, closed. No words came. Clara felt something shift in her chest. Hope fragile and terrifying. I have additional witnesses, Your Honor. She turned to face the crowd. People Mr. Whitfield has wronged over the years. People who were too afraid to speak until now. Miguel Santos stood. He cheated me. Changed my contracts, stole my grazing rights. Paid me off to keep quiet. The Sullivan widow stood. He took my ranch. Said my husband owed debts that didn't exist. By the time I realized it was too late. The Chen family patriarch stood. Our laundry, 30 years of work, gone because he wanted the building for his railway office. One by one they rose. A dozen voices. 24. 30 years of suppressed anger finally finding release. Hayes listened to each testimony. His face grew grimmer with every account. When the last witness sat, the judge turned to Whitfield. You have heard the accusations against you. Do you wish to respond? Whitfield's lawyers huddled together, whispering frantically. Preston stepped forward. Your Honor, we request a continuance, given the volume of new evidence. Denied. Hayes's voice was iron. This matter has been postponed long enough. The people of this territory deserve resolution. He stood. The crowd held its breath. Based on the evidence presented, I find the following. First, the foreclosure petition filed by First National Bank against the Mercer estate is fraudulent. The original debt was $1,200, not $3,200. Mrs. Mercer has already paid $800 against this amount. The remaining balance of $400 will be restructured into a reasonable payment plan. Clara's knees buckled. Nate caught her arm, held her upright. Second, the documents filed with the Territorial Land Office are hereby declared invalid. The Mercer property, 200 acres including all structures and improvements, remains the sole and rightful property of Clara Josephine Mercer. Tears streamed down Clara's face. She didn't try to stop them. Third, Hayes's voice hardened. Marcus Whitfield, you are hereby charged with forgery, fraud, and embezzlement. Based on the testimony presented today and the evidence in your own hand, I am remanding you to territorial custody pending a full criminal trial. The crowd exploded. Cheers, sobs, decades of suppressed emotion finally released. Whitfield stood frozen. His lawyers backed away, already calculating how to distance themselves from a sinking ship. Sheriff Reeves moved through the crowd, iron shackles in hand. Marcus Whitfield, you're under arrest. Whitfield's composure finally shattered. You can't do this. Do you know who I am? I built this town. I own half the territory. You can't. I can. Hayes's voice cut through his protests. And I am. Take him away. Reeves locked the shackles around Whitfield's wrists. The click of metal echoed across the suddenly silent square. Whitfield's eyes found Clara's. Something burned there, rage, disbelief, the impotent fury of a man who'd never been told no. This isn't over, he snarled. You think you've won? I'll appeal. I'll fight this to the Territorial Supreme Court. I'll destroy you. Clara stepped closer. Her voice was quiet, but carried in the silence. You already tried to destroy me. You took my husband. You starved my children. You burned my friend's store. You threatened everything I love. She met his eyes without flinching. And I'm still standing. What else have you got? Whitfield had no answer. Reeves led him away. The crowd parted. People who had cowered before him for decades now watched with something like wonder as the most powerful man in the territory was marched toward the jail. Clara watched until he disappeared. Then her legs gave out. She sank onto the nearest bench. Eli and Grace rushed to her side. Nate knelt in front of her, his weathered face creased with concern. Clara, you all right? I don't know. She laughed, the sound wild and strange. I don't know what I am. I can't feel my legs. Shock. Maggie appeared beside her, cane tapping. Perfectly normal. You just took down the most powerful man in the territory. Your body needs a minute to catch up. Clara looked at her children. Eli was crying openly now, tears streaming down his face. Grace had pressed against her side, small arms wrapped tight around her waist. We won, Eli whispered. Mama, we won. Yes, baby. Clara pulled him close. We won. The crowd began to surge forward. People wanting to shake her hand, touch her shoulder, thank her for what she'd done. Clara accepted each gesture numbly, still struggling to comprehend that it was real. Judge Hayes descended from the platform. He stopped in front of Clara, his one remaining hand extended. Mrs. Mercer, that was the most compelling testimony I've heard in 20 years on the bench. Clara shook his hand. I was terrified, Your Honor. I know. Hayes almost smiled. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's moving forward despite it. His grip tightened briefly. Your husband would be proud. The words broke something inside her. Clara's composure crumbled. She wept great heaving sobs that shook her entire body. Nate's arms came around her. Solid, warm, safe. Let it out, he murmured. You've earned it. Clara cried for Samuel, for the months of terror and uncertainty, for her children's hunger and fear, for every moment she'd thought she wouldn't survive. She cried until there was nothing left. When she finally raised her head, the square had emptied. Only her small circle remained, Nate and Abigail Maggie, and Harriet Father Thornton, hovering awkwardly at the edge. And her children. Always her children. What now? Eli's voice was hoarse from crying. Clara wiped her face with her sleeve, looked at the sky, blue and clear, the first truly warm day of spring. Now we go home. She stood, legs steadier now. Now we live. The walk back to the cabin took longer than usual. People stopped them constantly, neighbors who'd been too afraid to help before, now eager to apologize, to offer support, to be part of something they should have joined months ago. Clara accepted each overture with grace she didn't feel, smiled when she wanted to scream, nodded when she wanted to collapse. Finally they crested the ridge. The cabin stood in the afternoon light, small and weathered, but solid. The garden where Samuel had planted roses. The fence he'd built with his own hands. The window where she'd watched him ride away that last morning. Home. Clara stopped in the yard, drew a deep breath, let it out slowly. Mama. Grace tugged her hand. Can we go inside? In a minute, baby. Clara knelt, gathered both children close. First, I need to tell you something. Eli and Grace waited, their faces open, trusting. What we did today, what we've done these past months, that was hard. The hardest thing I've ever done. Clara's voice trembled, but held. There were times I wanted to give up. Times I thought we couldn't win. Times I was so scared I couldn't breathe. She cupped their faces in her hands. But we didn't give up. We fought. We told the truth even when it was dangerous. We stood together even when everyone else turned away. Her eyes burned with fresh tears. And we won. Not because we were stronger than Whitfield. Not because we had more power or money. We won because we were right. Because the truth matters. Because love matters. Eli's lip quivered. Pa helped. I felt him helping. I know you did. Clara kissed his forehead. I felt him too. Grace pressed closer. He said we'd win, in my dream. He promised. He kept his promise. Clara pulled them both into her arms. He always kept his promises. They held each other in the yard, the three of them, while the sun sank toward the mountains and the shadows lengthened across the land that was theirs again. Finally Clara rose, took her children's hands. Let's go inside, she said. Let's go home. The cabin was cold but clean. Clara started a fire while Eli pumped water and Grace collected eggs from the few surviving chickens. They worked in comfortable silence, the rhythm of familiar tasks soothing after the chaos of the day. A knock came at the door as the sun touched the horizon. Clara tensed. Old habits died hard, but the voice that called through the wood was familiar, safe. Clara, it's Nate. She opened the door. Nate stood on the porch, hat in hands, Abigail beside him. Behind them, Maggie and Harriet waited in a wagon loaded with baskets and bundles. We brought food, Nate said. Figured you wouldn't feel much like cooking tonight. Clara's throat tightened. You didn't have to. We wanted to. Maggie's voice carried from the wagon. Let us in before this stew gets cold, for heaven's sake. Clara stepped back. Let them flood into her small cabin with warmth and food and the noise of friendship. They ate together, all of them crowded around Clara's tiny table, sharing dishes, passing bread, talking over each other in the easy chaos of people who had survived something terrible together. Eli laughed at something Abigail said. The sound was so unexpected, so wonderful, that Clara had to turn away to hide her tears. Nate appeared beside her. His shoulder brushed hers. You did good today. I was terrified. I know. His voice was quiet. Bravest thing I ever saw. Clara looked at him. Really looked. At the lines around his eyes, the gray in his hair, the steadiness in his gaze. Thank you, she said. For everything. For protecting us. For standing with us. For doing what anyone with a conscience should have done. Nate's mouth quirked. Don't thank me for that. Thank me for the fence I'm going to help Eli fix tomorrow. Clara laughed. The sound surprised her, light and free and almost happy. Stay, she heard herself say. Tonight, all of you. It's too late to ride back and I have blankets. Nate's eyes softened. You sure? Clara looked at her crowded cabin. At Eli and Abigail playing cards by the fire. At Grace curled against Maggie's side listening to stories. At Harriet helping clear the dishes, her face relaxed for the first time in years. I'm sure. They stayed. That night, Clara lay awake listening to the sounds of a full house. Breathing, shifting. The occasional murmur of sleep talk. For months, silence had been her companion. Fear her shadow. Loneliness her constant state. Now warmth surrounded her. Safety. Something that felt almost like hope. She closed her eyes. And for the first time since Samuel died, Clara Mercer slept without dreaming of loss. Morning came soft and golden. Clara woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of voices in the yard. She rose, wrapped herself in a shawl, moved to the window. Nate and Eli stood by the broken fence, tools in hand. Nate was demonstrating something, the proper way to set a post, maybe. Eli watched with intense concentration, nodding seriously. In the garden, Abigail was teaching Grace to identify early spring shoots. Their laughter carried across the yard. Maggie sat on the porch cane across her knees, face turned toward the morning sun. Harriet stood apart, uncertain of her place, but present. Willing. Clara pressed her hand against the cold glass. This, she thought. This is what Samuel wanted for us. Not wealth, not land, not even the cabin itself. This, family, community, people who showed up when it mattered. She dressed quickly, joined them outside. Morning, Mama. Eli grinned, a nail clenched between his teeth. Nate's teaching me to fix the fence proper. I see that. Clara ruffled his hair. Don't put nails in your mouth. Eli rolled his eyes, but removed the nail. Nate straightened, wiping sweat from his forehead. He's a quick learner. Got his father's hands. The words hit Clara unexpectedly. Samuel's hands. She remembered them, gentle, capable, always reaching out to help. Thank you, she said quietly. Nate nodded once. Went back to work. Clara turned to find Maggie watching her with knowing eyes. What? Nothing. Maggie's mouth curved. Just watching something bloom. Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks. I don't know what you mean. Yes, you do. Maggie patted the porch step beside her. Sit with me a minute. Clara sat. The morning stretched before them warm and clear. Somewhere in the pines, a bird sang. Your Samuel was a good man, Maggie said. One of the best I knew. He was. But he's gone, Clara. Maggie's voice was gentle. And you're not. You're young. You have years ahead of you. Years to live, to love, to build something new. Clara's throat tightened. It feels wrong to even think about. It's not wrong. Maggie's bandaged hand covered hers. It's human. Samuel would want you to live, not just survive. He'd want those children to have a father figure. He'd want you to be happy. Clara looked at Nate, still working the fence with patient competence. At Eli beside him, learning, laughing. It's too soon. Maybe. Maggie squeezed her hand. But soon isn't never. Remember that. She rose, gathered her cane, moved toward the wagon where Harriet waited. Clara sat alone on the porch, watching the morning unfold. Too soon, she told herself. But somewhere beneath the grief, beneath the exhaustion and the fear, something stirred. Something that felt almost like hope. The weeks after the trial passed like water through fingers, quick and quiet, and full of small miracles. Clara woke each morning to sunlight instead of dread, to birdsong, instead of the pounding of her own fearful heart. The territory healed slowly. First National Bank was seized by territorial auditors, its assets liquidated to repay the families Whitfield had destroyed. Miguel Santos recovered his grazing rights. The Sullivan widow received compensation for her stolen ranch. The Chen family rebuilt their laundry with funds returned from Whitfield's accounts. Clara received a letter from the railway company formal official offering $800 for an easement through the corner of her property. She read it 3 times before she believed it was real. What are you going to do with all that money? Eli asked, peering over her shoulder. Clara folded the letter carefully. Pay off the rest of our debt, fix the roof, buy you new boots that actually fit. And then... She looked around the cabin, at the patched walls, the worn furniture, the life they'd built from nothing. Then we live, Eli. That's all. We just live. Nate came every Sunday now. Sometimes Abigail joined him, sometimes not. He'd work on whatever needed fixing, the fence, the barn door, the chicken coop that had never quite recovered from Whitfield's men. Clara found herself watching him more than she meant to. The way he moved, deliberate and sure. The patience in his hands when he showed Eli how to use a plane. The gentleness in his voice when he answered Grace's endless questions. One afternoon in late April, she brought him water while he worked on the barn roof. You don't have to keep coming. The words came out before she could stop them. Nate paused, hammer in hand. You want me to stop? No. Clara's face heated. I just mean you've repaid whatever debt you felt you owed. Samuel would say you've done enough. Nate climbed down from the ladder, took the water, drank deep. Samuel might say that. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. But I'm not coming for Samuel anymore. Clara's breath caught. Nate set down the cup. His eyes met hers, steady, patient, asking nothing, offering everything. I know it's too soon, he said quietly. I know you're still grieving. I'm not asking for anything, Clara. I'm just telling you the truth. I come because I want to. Because your boy makes me laugh. Because your girl asks questions no one else thinks to ask. Because... He paused. Because you're the bravest woman I've ever met, and I like being near you. Clara's heart hammered. She didn't know what to say. Didn't know what she wanted to say. Nate, you don't have to answer. He picked up his hammer. I'm not going anywhere. Whenever you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'll be here. He climbed back up the ladder. Now let me finish this roof before your chickens get rained on. Clara stood in the yard, the empty cup in her hands, something warm spreading through her chest. She didn't have words for it yet, but she was learning. May arrived with wildflowers and warm winds. The snow retreated to the highest peaks, leaving the valley lush and green. Clara planted the garden Samuel had always dreamed of: tomatoes, squash beans, corn. Eli helped dig the rows, while Grace followed behind, dropping seeds into the furrows with solemn concentration. "Pa wanted a garden like this," Eli said one evening, leaning on his shovel. "He used to talk about it. Said when things settled down, he'd plant enough to feed half the territory." "Your father had big dreams." Clara wiped dirt from her hands. "He always thought bigger than one family, one homestead. He wanted to help everyone." "Is that why he went to the mining camp, even though it was dangerous?" Clara was quiet for a moment. The question had haunted her for months: why Samuel had gone, why he'd risked everything, why he'd left her. "Your father believed that healing was sacred." She sat on the porch step, patted the space beside her. Eli sat. "He used to say that every person deserved care regardless of who they were or what they could pay. When Whitfield's miners got sick, your father didn't see enemies. He saw people in pain." "But Whitfield was bad." "Yes, Whitfield was bad. But the miners weren't Whitfield. They were just men trying to feed their families." Clara put her arm around her son. "Your father couldn't let them die, Eli. It wasn't in him to turn away from suffering, even if it meant leaving us." The question cut deep. Clara pulled Eli closer. "He didn't think he was leaving forever. He thought he'd go help them come home." Her voice cracked. "He was wrong, and I was angry at him for a long time. Angry that he chose strangers over us." "Are you still angry?" Clara considered the question, really considered it. "No," she said finally. "I'm not angry anymore. I'm proud. Your father died doing what he believed in. He died being exactly who he was. How many people can say that?" Eli leaned against her shoulder. "I want to be like him." "You already are." Clara kissed the top of his head. "More than you know." Grace appeared in the doorway, a jar clutched in her hands. "Mama, look, I caught a firefly." Clara smiled, pulled her daughter close. "Let's see." The three of them sat on the porch as the sun set, watching the firefly pulse its tiny light against the glass. Tomorrow Clara would let it go, but tonight they watched it glow. June brought the first real heat of summer, and with it a visitor Clara hadn't expected. She was hanging laundry when the wagon appeared on the ridge, official-looking, driven by a young man in a uniform she didn't recognize. Clara's stomach tightened. She'd learned to fear official visitors. But the man who climbed down wasn't threatening. He was young, maybe 25, with honest eyes and ink-stained fingers. "Mrs. Mercer." He removed his hat. "I'm Thomas Brennan. I'm a reporter for the Helena Herald. I was hoping to speak with you." Clara's hands stilled on the clothesline. "About what?" "About your case. About what you did." Brennan pulled a notebook from his satchel. "Word has spread, ma'am. People all over the territory are talking about the widow who took down Marcus Whitfield. I'd like to tell your story, the full story, so others might learn from it." Clara was quiet for a long moment. She thought of the months of terror, the sleepless nights, the moments when she'd wanted to give up. Why would anyone want to read about that? Because it matters. Brennan's voice was earnest. Because there are other people like you, widows, families, folks being crushed by powerful men who think they're above the law. Your story could give them hope. Show them it's possible to fight back and win. Clara looked at her children. Eli had emerged from the barn, watching with wary eyes. Grace peeked from behind the cabin corner, curious as always. "I'll think about it," she said. "Come back tomorrow." Brennan nodded, replaced his hat. "Thank you, ma'am. That's all I ask." He drove away. That night, Clara sat at the table staring at Samuel's medical case. She'd kept it closed since the trial, unable to face the memories inside. Now she opened it. His stethoscope. His notes. His handwriting cramped and hurried and so achingly familiar. She lifted a folded paper from the bottom of the case. A letter never sent. She'd found it weeks after his death, tucked beneath his instruments. My dearest Clara, if you're reading this, I've gone somewhere I can't return from. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for leaving you, for leaving our children, for choosing to go when staying would have been safer. But I need you to understand, I couldn't live with myself if I turned away. Those men in the mining camp are dying, and I'm the only one who can help. If I don't go, their deaths will be on my conscience forever. You are the strongest person I know. Whatever happens to me, I know you'll protect our children. I know you'll find a way. Don't let grief consume you. Don't let fear rule you. Live, Clara. Love again if you can. Build something beautiful on the land we claim together. You are my heart. You always will be. Forever. Samuel. Clara read the letter 3 times. Tears streamed down her face, but they weren't tears of grief anymore. They were tears of release. Don't let grief consume you. Don't let fear rule you. Live. She folded the letter carefully, placed it back in the case. Then she stood, walked to the window, looked out at the land that was hers. Tomorrow, she would tell Brennan, yes. She would share her story, not for fame, not for recognition, but because Samuel was right. Because stories mattered. Because somewhere another widow was facing her own Marcus Whitfield. And maybe, just maybe, hearing Clara's story would give her the courage to fight. Clara pressed her hand against the glass. I'm living, she whispered to the stars. Just like you asked. The story ran in the Helena Herald on July 4th, Independence Day. Brennan had written it well, honest, unflinching, capturing both the terror and the triumph. He'd quoted Clara extensively, but also Maggie Nate Miguel Santos, the Sullivan widow. The article painted a picture of a community that had been broken by fear and healed by courage. The response was immediate. Letters arrived at Clara's cabin, dozens of them, then hundreds. From widows thanking her for speaking out. From families who'd been cheated by men like Whitfield. From lawyers offering to help others fight similar battles. From politicians promising to strengthen protections for homesteaders. Clara read every letter, answered as many as she could. But the letter that mattered most arrived in late July, hand-delivered by a messenger from the territorial governor's office. Clara opened it with trembling hands. Dear Mrs. Mercer, it is my honor to inform you that the territorial legislature has passed the Mercer Act, named in recognition of your courage and sacrifice. This act establishes new protections for property owners against fraudulent foreclosure, creates an independent auditing system for territorial banks, and provides legal aid funds for citizens facing unjust seizure of their assets. Your fight has changed the law itself. Because of you, future families will have protections your family did not. On behalf of the people of Montana Territory, I extend our deepest gratitude. With respect and admiration, Benjamin Harrison Governor Clara sat down hard. The Mercer Act, her name, Samuel's name, written into law. Mama! Eli appeared in the doorway. What is it? Clara couldn't speak. She held out the letter. Eli read it slowly, his lips moving. When he finished, his eyes were wet. Pa would be proud, he whispered. Yes. Clara pulled him close. He would. The summer faded into autumn gold and crimson spreading across the mountains. Clara harvested her garden more food than they could eat enough to share with neighbors and preserve for winter. The cabin had changed. Nate had added a room for storage. He said, though Clara knew it could easily become something else. The fence stood straight and strong. The barn door no longer hung crooked. And Nate himself had changed. Or maybe Clara had changed. Either way, the space between them had grown smaller. Comfortable silences, shared meals, hands that brushed when passing tools. One evening in October, he found her on the porch, watching the sunset. Mind company? She shook her head. He sat beside her. They watched the light fade together. Orange bleeding into purple, stars emerging one by one. Clara. Nate's voice was quiet. I need to ask you something. Her heart quickened. Ask? I'm not Samuel. He turned to face her. I'll never be Samuel. I can't heal the sick or charm a room or make people feel better just by walking in. I'm just a blacksmith, a widower with a daughter, and not much else to offer. Clara opened her mouth to protest, but he held up a hand. Let me finish. He took a breath. I know you loved him. I know part of you always will. I'm not asking you to stop. I'm asking if there's room, if maybe someday there could be room for something else. For me. Clara looked at him. Really looked. At the gray in his hair, the lines around his eyes, the steadiness in his gaze that had anchored her through the worst months of her life. At his hands, strong, capable, patient. Hands that had fixed her fence and taught her son and carried her daughter when she was too tired to walk. At his heart scarred by loss like hers, but still beating. Still reaching out. I'm scared, she said quietly. I know. I don't want to lose anyone else. I know that too. His hand covered hers, warm, solid. I can't promise you forever, Clara. Nobody can. But I can promise you today, tomorrow, as many days as we're given. Clara's vision blurred with tears. She thought of Samuel's letter, love again if you can. She thought of Maggie's words, soon isn't never. She thought of her children Eli, who needed a father's guidance, and Grace who asked questions only a full family could answer. She thought of her own heart battered and broken, and somehow still beating. Yes, she whispered. Nate's breath caught. Yes. Yes, there's room. Clara laced her fingers through his. Yes, I want to try. Yes to today. Yes to tomorrow. Yes to whatever comes next. Nate pulled her close. His arms wrapped around her. Not possessive, not demanding, just holding. Just there. Clara rested her head against his chest. Listened to his heartbeat. Steady. Strong. Present. Mama. They pulled apart. Eli stood in the doorway, Grace beside him. Both children wore expressions of cautious hope. Are you and Mr. Cole? Eli couldn't finish the sentence. Clara looked at Nate. He nodded slightly. We're going to spend more time together, Clara said carefully. See if we fit. Would that be all right with you? Eli's face split into a grin. Does that mean Abigail's going to be my sister? Let's not get ahead of ourselves. But Clara was smiling too. Grace stepped forward, reached for Nate's hand. He took it gently. Will you teach me to make horseshoes? She asked. Nate's eyes glistened. I'd like that very much, Miss Grace. The four of them stood on the porch together, watching the last light fade from the sky. Not a family yet, but something close, something growing, something worth fighting for. Winter came gentle that year. The snow fell soft instead of bitter. The wind whispered instead of screamed. Clara woke each morning to warmth the fire Nate had banked the night before, the children's laughter from the loft, the smell of coffee brewing on the stove. Christmas arrived with modest gifts and immodest joy. Maggie brought her famous stew. Father Thornton conducted a blessing. Miguel Santos played guitar, while his wife sang carols in Spanish. The cabin overflowed with people. Neighbors who had become friends, friends who had become family. Clara stood in the kitchen doorway watching Nate help Eli assemble a wooden toy. Grace sat on Abigail's lap, learning to braid. Harriet, who had returned from Oregon after Whitfield's imprisonment, handed out cookies with a smile that had taken months to reach her eyes. This, Clara thought. This is what survival looks like. Not just enduring, not just getting through, living, loving, building something that mattered. She felt a hand on her shoulder, turned. Nate stood behind her, his eyes soft in the firelight. You all right? Better than all right. Clara leaned into him. I'm happy, Nate. I didn't think I'd ever say that again, but I'm happy. He pressed a kiss to her temple. Good. That's all I want for you. What do you want for yourself? Nate was quiet for a moment, watching the chaos of joy unfold before them. "This," he said finally. "Just this. Forever if possible." Clara smiled. "I think we can arrange that." The party wound down. Guests departed with warm goodbyes and promises to return. The children fell asleep in a heap by the fire, too exhausted to climb to the loft. Clara and Nate sat on the porch wrapped in blankets watching the stars. "I have something for you." Clara reached into her pocket, pulled out a small object wrapped in cloth. Nate unwrapped it carefully. Her wedding ring. The one she'd tried to sell to save her children. The one that had started everything. "Clara, I can't." "You can." She closed his fingers around it. "I've been carrying it like a weight, like an anchor to a life that's over. But it's not over, it's just changed. I want you to have it. Melt it down, make something new. A horseshoe for luck. A nail for your shop. Something that builds instead of binds." Nate's eyes were wet. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." Clara touched his face. "Samuel gave me that ring because he loved me. The best way to honor that love is to keep living, to keep loving, to turn something old into something new." Nate kissed her, then soft and tender and full of promise. When they parted, the stars seemed brighter. "I love you, Clara Mercer." The words hit her like sunlight, like spring after endless winter. "I love you too, Nathaniel Cole." They sat together on the porch, wrapped in warmth, surrounded by everything they'd built. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The territory was changing, growing, becoming something different than it had been. There would be hard days ahead, hard winters, hard choices, hard moments when the past tried to drag them backward. But there would be joy too. Laughter and love and the steady accumulation of ordinary miracles. Clara looked at the cabin behind her, at the children sleeping by the fire, at the man beside her solid and true. A year ago she had knelt on a frozen boardwalk, offering her wedding ring to a stranger, begging for food to keep her children alive. Now she sat on her own porch on land that bore her name, surrounded by people who loved her. She had survived the worst winter of her life. And spring had finally come. In the years that followed, people would tell the story of Clara Mercer. They'd tell it in saloons and schoolrooms, around campfires and kitchen tables. The widow who fought back. The mother who refused to surrender. The woman who changed the law itself by simply refusing to be silent. They'd tell it wrong sometimes, embellishing the danger, romanticizing the struggle. That was the nature of stories. They grew in the telling. But the heart of it stayed true. A woman alone. Children to protect. A powerful enemy who thought he could take everything. And one cold morning, a choice. Not to beg, not to flee, but to fight. Clara Mercer lived to see her children grown. Eli became a doctor like his father. Grace became a lawyer fighting for families like hers. Nate stayed by her side for 30 years, building and mending and loving with steady hands. She never forgot Samuel. His picture hung above the mantel, his medical case preserved in a place of honor. She told stories about him to her grandchildren, about his courage, his kindness, his unwavering belief that healing was sacred. But she didn't live in the past. She lived in the present fully and fiercely, exactly as he'd asked. When Clara died at 72 peacefully in her sleep, the whole territory mourned. The governor ordered flags lowered. The Helena Herald ran her picture on the front page. But the truest tribute came from her granddaughter, who stood at the funeral and spoke words Clara herself had once whispered to a frightened boy on a winter night. "My grandmother used to say that being brave doesn't mean you don't feel scared. It means you feel everything and keep going anyway." She felt everything. The fear, the grief, the love, the hope. And she kept going. Through the darkest winter, through the longest night, through everything that tried to break her. The granddaughter paused, looked at the crowd gathered to honor a woman who had started with nothing and ended with everything. She taught us that the truth matters, that love matters, that no matter how powerful your enemies or how dark your circumstances, You always have a choice. You can give up or you can fight. You can let fear rule you, or you can let it fuel you. She lifted her chin. Clara's chin. Her grandmother's stubborn, defiant, unbreakable chin. Clara Mercer chose to fight. And because she did, we are all standing here today free and protected by laws that bear her name. The granddaughter smiled through her tears. Rest now, Grandma. You've earned it. The grave was simple. A stone marker beside Samuel's beneath the pine tree where Clara used to sit and watch the sunset. The inscription read, Clara Josephine Mercer, 1855, 1927. Wife, mother, fighter. She kept going, and she had. Through every storm, every setback, every moment when surrender seemed easier than survival, she had kept going. And in the end, that made all the difference. The land remembered her. The mountains she'd watched through every season. The valley that had nearly swallowed her whole. The homestead that had passed to her children and their children after them. It remembered the winter when the frost never broke and a widow fell to her knees in desperation. It remembered the spring when the truth surfaced like creek water through snow. It remembered the summer when the law changed because one woman refused to be silent. And it remembered the love imperfect, complicated, hard-won that had grown from the ashes of grief. Clara Mercer's story didn't end with her death. Stories never really end. They pass from voice to voice, heart to heart, generation to generation. And somewhere even now a young woman faces an impossible choice. A mother weighs her options. A widow wonders if she has the strength to go on. Perhaps she hears the story. Perhaps she doesn't. But Clara's legacy lives anyway, written into the very laws of the land. Fight back. Tell the truth. Keep going. And never ever let them take what's yours without a battle. That was Clara Mercer's gift to the world. That was her victory. And it would endure long after the last person who remembered her face had returned to the earth, enduring in the courage of strangers, in the justice of laws, in the simple, stubborn truth that one person standing firm can change everything. The land knew it, the mountains knew it, and now so do you.